Here is 101 unknown facts about the UFC. When the UFC was first launched in 1993, it was intended to be a one-time pay-per-view event designed to find the most effective martial arts style. There were almost no rules, no weight classes, and it was marketed as a brutal spectacle. The event's massive success took even the founders by surprise, eventually leading to the creation of a full-fledged global sport. Joe Rogan, now the iconic voice of UFC, initially declined multiple offers to join the organization. At the time, he was already successful as a comedian and television host, and didn't see the value in being associated with a sport many saw as violent and unregulated. He finally joined in 1997 as a backstage interviewer and later became the lead color commentator, forever changing the UFC's presentation. The UFC's trademark eight-sided cage, known as the Octagon, was inspired not by martial arts theory, but by a 1980 Chuck Norris movie titled The Octagon. Art Davie, one of the organization's founders, thought the shape looked aggressive and futuristic, so he adopted it. The unique design prevents fighters from getting trapped in corners and has become the symbol of mixed martial arts worldwide. Although fans often believe fighters come up with their own nicknames, the UFC frequently trademarks fighter nicknames for branding purposes. This legal control means fighters cannot freely use their nicknames outside of the UFC without permission, giving the promotion a powerful hold on their marketability and image, which helps in merchandising and promotional deals. In the earliest UFC events, such as UFC 1 through UFC 7, fighters were allowed to use headbutts, groin strikes, and hair pulling. The fights were promoted as having no rules, which attracted significant criticism and political pressure. These brutal early events prompted the creation of the unified rules of mixed martial arts, which introduced weight classes and banned dangerous moves to make the sport safer and more palatable. UFC 12 was the first event to introduce weight classes, a crucial step for fighters' safety and legitimacy. Previously, fighters of drastically different sizes and weights could face off, leading to dangerous mismatches. By establishing divisions, the UFC improved competitive balance, gained approval from athletic commissions, and paved the way for the sport's widespread acceptance. Dana White didn't create the UFC, but played a pivotal role in its growth. He was a childhood friend of casino executives Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. After the Fertitta brothers bought the struggling UFC for $2 million in 2001, Dana became its president. His business acumen and promotional skills helped transform the UFC into a multi-billion-dollar sports empire. The very first UFC event had no gloves, no weight classes, and very few rules. Fighters such as Royce Gracie competed barefoot using traditional martial arts techniques, shocking audiences with their raw and often brutal fights. This early format both captivated and horrified viewers, creating controversy but establishing the UFC's reputation as a proving ground for real fighting skill. Royce Gracie's victories in UFC 1, 2, and 4 demonstrated that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's ground fighting techniques could overcome size and strength advantages. At a time when most fighters relied on striking or wrestling, Gracie's ability to control and submit opponents revolutionized martial arts and became the foundation of modern MMA strategy. The UFC nearly faced a nationwide ban in the United States due to public backlash and political opposition. Senator John McCain famously called it human cockfighting, leading to the sport being dropped from cable networks and banned in multiple states. To survive, the UFC introduced stricter rules, weight classes, and drug testing, eventually gaining sanctioning by athletic commissions. Before the UFC implemented drug testing in 2001, there were no formal policies on performance-enhancing drugs. Only after pressure from athletic commissions and the desire for legitimacy did the UFC start standardized drug testing programs. In 2015, they partnered with the United States anti-doping agency, USADA, creating one of the toughest year-round testing protocols in professional sports. Conor McGregor became the first fighter in UFC history to hold 2 titles simultaneously when he defeated Eddie Alvarez at UFC 205 in 2016. This unprecedented achievement in featherweight and lightweight divisions catapulted McGregor into global superstardom and changed how fighters brand and market themselves across multiple weight classes. Francis Ngannou's rise to UFC heavyweight champion is an inspiring story of resilience. Before his success, he was homeless and living on the streets of Paris after moving from Cameroon with dreams of becoming a boxer. Sleeping in parking lots and struggling financially, his journey from adversity to world champion remains one of the most compelling in UFC history. The UFC's first event in Abu Dhabi faced extreme challenges due to the desert heat. Fighters were competing outdoors, causing issues like heat exhaustion. Over time, the UFC invested in technology and infrastructure, leading to the creation of Fight Island, a fully air-conditioned venue designed to host international events safely amid global travel restrictions. Georges St-Pierre, one of the greatest UFC fighters ever, has publicly admitted to having a phobia of aliens and strange, unexplained experiences. Despite this unusual fear, his discipline, technical skill, and mental toughness earned him multiple world championships and made him a legend in the sport, proving even champions have unique quirks. The UFC has hosted events on nearly every continent except Antarctica. Their global reach includes fights in Brazil, the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. This international presence has helped popularize MMA worldwide, bringing together fighters of diverse backgrounds and cultures under one competitive banner. Brock Lesnar, a former WWE superstar, became one of the fastest-rising UFC champions by winning the heavyweight title with only a handful of professional MMA fights. His crossover appeal from pro wrestling to MMA drew millions of new fans and broke pay-per-view records, significantly raising the UFC's profile during his tenure. The UFC made gloves mandatory starting at UFC 14 in 1997. Before that, many fighters competed bare-knuckle, leading to more cuts and injuries. The introduction of gloves improved fighter safety, reduced superficial injuries, and helped athletic commissions sanction the sport, making it easier for the UFC to expand its reach. Ronda Rousey was not the first female fighter signed by the UFC. However, she was the first official UFC women's bantamweight champion. Her success convinced UFC President Dana White, who had previously opposed women fighting in the UFC, to launch an official women's division, paving the way for women to become headliners in the sport. UFC 100, held in 2009, remains one of the highest-grossing pay-per-view events in MMA history. Featuring star-studded matchups like Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir and Georges St-Pierre versus Thiago Alves, the event marked a major turning point in MMA's rise to mainstream popularity and solidified UFC's dominance in combat sports. Chael Sonnen, despite never winning a UFC title, built one of the most memorable careers through his trash talk and rivalry with Anderson Silva. His dominant performance for nearly 5 rounds against Silva at UFC 117 elevated him to celebrity status, showcasing how personality and storylines can be as powerful as championships in the UFC. Anderson Silva had a unique pre-fight ritual where he would wear a clown nose backstage to relax and stay loose before fights. Known for his unshakable composure and striking brilliance, these quirky habits gave fans a glimpse into the unusual mental strategies used by elite fighters to prepare for battle. Jon Jones became the youngest UFC champion ever at just 23 years old when he won the light heavyweight belt. Despite multiple controversies outside the cage, Jones' dominance and innovative fighting style have made him one of the most talented and debated athletes in MMA history. The UFC briefly experimented with a team-based league called the International Fight League, IFL, where fighters competed in teams coached by MMA legends. Although innovative, the format failed to capture fan interest, leading to its closure, but it influenced the UFC's development of reality shows and talent development systems. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson holds the record for the latest finish in UFC history, submitting Ray Borg via flying armbar at 4:59 of the 5th round at UFC 216. This incredible finish showcased his technical mastery and endurance, and is considered one of the most exciting submissions ever seen in the sport. Tony Ferguson once went on a 12-fight win streak against some of the best lightweights in UFC history. Known for his unorthodox striking and relentless cardio, Ferguson's streak was one of the longest in UFC history and earned him a reputation as one of the most dangerous fighters in the division. The UFC has occasionally featured bouts with multiple brothers fighting on the same card, such as the Diaz brothers, Nate and Nick, who have both headlined major events. Their unique sibling dynamic and complementary fighting styles have made them fan favorites and added a compelling narrative layer to the sport. Fedor Emelianenko, widely regarded as one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, never fought in the UFC despite repeated interest from both sides. Contract disputes and timing issues prevented him from joining, but his legacy in other organizations like Pride helped popularize MMA globally. The UFC once hosted a fight between a professional boxer and an MMA fighter, pitting James Toney against Randy Couture at UFC 118. Toney had little MMA experience, and Couture won via submission. The bout highlighted the challenges of cross-discipline matchups and reinforced the importance of mixed martial arts skill sets. Brazilian fighter Anderson Silva holds the record for the longest title reign in UFC history, successfully defending the middleweight title 10 times over more than 6 years. His creativity, precision striking, and elusive style set a new standard for champions in the sport. The UFC's Dana White famously guaranteed victories for certain fighters before their bouts, adding extra hype and confidence to the matchups. This tactic sometimes created extra pressure, but also helped generate mainstream media attention and sold millions of pay-per-view buys. A controversial moment in UFC history was the first fight between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier, where Jones tested positive for banned substances and was stripped of his title. Despite the setback, Jones remains one of the most successful and polarizing figures in MMA. The UFC Fight Pass streaming service has helped grow the sport's fan base by providing access to hundreds of live events and historic fights from around the world. It allows fans to explore MMA history and watch up-and-coming fighters long before they reach the main UFC stage. BJ Penn, the first American to win a UFC title in Brazil, was known for his quick rise and exceptional Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills. Despite a turbulent career later on, his early achievements inspired a new generation of fighters to train across multiple disciplines. The UFC's early marketing focused heavily on violence and no-holds-barred competition, which initially scared off sponsors and networks. Over time, the organization shifted towards promoting the athlete's skills, discipline, and stories, making it more appealing to mainstream audiences and advertisers. Michael Bisping became the first British UFC champion in 2016 when he won the middleweight title. His rise was notable for overcoming early setbacks and injuries, earning him respect as a tough, gritty fighter and a charismatic commentator after retirement. The Octagon's fence was initially made from chicken wire coated in black vinyl, before switching to a more durable chain-link fence. The change improved fighter safety and visibility for fans and cameras, becoming an essential element of the sport's identity. UFC fighter Nate Diaz once competed in a professional boxing match for charity, highlighting how MMA fighters sometimes cross over to other combat sports for unique challenges or personal causes. The UFC has featured fights where competitors hold professional records in other sports, including Olympic wrestling, boxing, and even sumo wrestling, showcasing the diversity of backgrounds that come together in MMA. Chuck Liddell was one of the first UFC fighters to gain mainstream celebrity status, partly due to his unique mohawk hairstyle and knockout power. He helped bring MMA into the living rooms of casual fans in the early 2000s. The UFC once banned the use of soccer kicks and knees to the head of a grounded opponent after political pressure and safety concerns, despite these moves being legal in earlier MMA organizations like Pride. Fighters often train in multiple martial arts disciplines for years before competing professionally, making MMA one of the most complex and demanding sports physically and mentally. Many UFC fighters come from wrestling backgrounds, particularly in the United States, where collegiate wrestling provides an excellent foundation for MMA grappling and control techniques. The UFC has its own official walkout theme music for certain fighters, contributing to their brand identity and fan recognition during live events. Some UFC champions have successfully defended titles in multiple weight classes, a rare feat that demonstrates exceptional versatility and skill across different physical demands. Female fighters in the UFC have helped revolutionize women's sports by breaking stereotypes and showing that women can headline major pay-per-view events and draw massive audiences. The UFC has a Hall of Fame that honors legendary fighters, coaches, and contributors, preserving the history and achievements of those who shaped the sport. Several UFC events have broken attendance records for combat sports, with venues packed to capacity and millions watching worldwide, reflecting MMA's explosive growth. The Octagon was designed not only for fighter safety but to enhance spectator experience by providing 360-degree viewing angles, making the sport visually exciting both live and on broadcast. Many fighters have unique nicknames inspired by personality traits, fighting style, or even childhood experiences, adding color and lore to their public personas. Some UFC fighters started their careers late in life yet managed to reach elite status, proving that determination and discipline can sometimes overcome age disadvantages. UFC's partnership with ESPN in 2019 significantly expanded the sport's visibility and brought it into mainstream sports media coverage, increasing its global fan base. Several UFC fighters have transitioned into successful acting careers or other entertainment fields, leveraging their fame and charisma beyond the cage. The UFC has continually evolved its rules to balance fighter safety with preserving the sport's excitement, including rounds, judging criteria, and fouls. Weight cutting has become a controversial topic in UFC, with fighters sometimes losing extreme amounts of weight before weigh-ins, leading to calls for reform to protect athlete health. The UFC has developed several reality shows like The Ultimate Fighter to discover new talent and provide fans with behind-the-scenes access to fighter training and personal stories. Veteran fighters often mentor younger athletes, passing down knowledge and helping sustain the sport's growth and competitive standards. The UFC's annual international events celebrate local martial arts traditions, blending global MMA styles with regional culture and pride. Fighters' walkout entrances often include pyrotechnics, music, and elaborate choreography, making UFC events spectacular shows beyond just the fights. Coaching teams of the UFC often consist of experts from various martial arts disciplines, creating multifaceted training regimens tailored to each fighter's strengths and weaknesses. The UFC's rise has inspired countless amateur MMA leagues and gyms worldwide, contributing to the sport's grassroots development and popularity. Some UFC fights have ended in draws, a rare but sometimes controversial outcome that sparks debate among fans and analysts. The UFC employs a panel of judges who score fights based on criteria such as striking, grappling, aggression, and control, with decisions sometimes leading to heated fan disagreements. Several UFC champions have successfully defended their titles 5 or more times, a mark of dominance rarely seen in professional sports. Fighters who show exceptional heart and sportsmanship often earn Fight of the Night bonuses, rewarding entertaining and competitive bouts. Many UFC fighters have charitable foundations, using their fame to give back to communities and support causes close to their hearts. The UFC holds an annual award ceremony celebrating the best fights, fighters, and moments of the year, helping to promote its stars and create memorable milestones. Fighters from over 70 countries have competed in the UFC, showcasing the sport's truly international appeal. The UFC has faced criticism for pay disparities between top stars and lower-tier fighters, a topic of ongoing discussion in combat sports labor rights. The UFC's media presence includes podcasts, documentaries, and social media platforms, engaging fans with stories beyond the cage. Many fighters attribute their success to mental training and meditation, highlighting the importance of mindset in a brutal physical sport. The UFC has been credited with popularizing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu worldwide, leading to a boom in BJJ academies and practitioners. Some UFC fighters hold belts in multiple martial arts disciplines outside MMA, showcasing their diverse skills and dedication. The UFC has partnered with major brands for sponsorship deals, boosting its financial stability and marketing reach. The UFC's approach to athlete health has evolved to include concussion protocols and medical suspensions to protect fighters' safety. The UFC's storytelling often emphasizes fighter backgrounds, struggles, and personal journeys, making matches emotionally compelling for fans. Fighters' entrances sometimes feature family members, trainers, or even pets, adding a personal touch to the spectacle. Several UFC fighters have military backgrounds, bringing discipline and combat skills from service into the cage. The UFC has contributed to the rise of MMA-themed video games, expanding the sport's cultural influence. Some fighters have made successful comebacks after long layoffs, demonstrating the resilience and unpredictability of the sport. The UFC has helped change perceptions of martial arts from street fighting to respected competitive sports with global followings. Fighters often have signature moves or techniques that become their trademark, contributing to their legacy and fan appeal. The UFC continues to innovate with new technologies for judging, training, and broadcasting, maintaining its leadership in combat sports. The UFC's original purpose was to settle debates about which martial art was the most effective in real combat. However, the event quickly proved that no single discipline was superior. Fighters who mastered multiple arts and blended striking, wrestling, and submission techniques, what became known as mixed martial arts, were the ones who succeeded. This realization revolutionized martial arts training worldwide and gave birth to MMA as a distinct sport. Early UFC events were held with minimal medical oversight, and fighter safety was often overlooked. After some brutal injuries and even fatalities in related competitions, the UFC began working closely with athletic commissions to establish safety standards. These reforms included mandatory medical exams, pre-fight blood work, weight management rules, and post-fight medical suspensions to prevent fighters from competing when injured. The UFC's Ultimate Fighter reality TV series, launched in 2005, was a turning point for the sport's popularity. The show introduced MMA to a mainstream audience and humanized fighters by showing their training, struggles, and personalities. The dramatic finale between Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar is often credited with saving the UFC from obscurity and launching MMA's modern era. Fighters in the UFC often follow strict nutrition and training regimens, sometimes losing 10 to 20% of their body weight in the days before weigh-ins to make their division limits. This practice, called weight cutting, involves dehydration and intense workouts but can be dangerous. Some fighters have experienced kidney failure or fainting, prompting the UFC and athletic commissions to explore safer alternatives. UFC fighters are known for their intense cross-training, often incorporating disciplines such as Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, boxing, judo, and karate. This multidisciplinary approach requires not only physical skill, but also high mental adaptability to switch between striking and grappling seamlessly during a fight. The octagon's canvas is carefully designed to reduce injuries. It includes a padded floor with a specific grip material that allows fighters to move quickly without slipping. The fence is covered with black vinyl to prevent cuts and abrasions, and the posts are padded. All these details combine to create a safer, fairer fighting environment that also looks professional on broadcast. The UFC's scoring system is based on the 10-point must system borrowed from boxing, where judges award the winner of each round 10 points and the loser a lesser number, usually 9 or less. This system, however, sometimes leads to controversial decisions because judges must evaluate many variables, including effective striking, grappling, aggression, and control. Fighters with wrestling backgrounds often dominate the UFC because wrestling teaches control, positioning, and takedown skills that can neutralize an opponent's striking. This is why many of the most successful UFC fighters, such as Khabib Nurmagomedov and Daniel Cormier, have wrestling pedigrees, whether in folk style, freestyle, or sambo wrestling. The UFC's move into digital streaming with UFC Fight Pass allowed fans worldwide to access historic fights and lesser-known events. This platform also streams international promotions, helping MMA fans discover new talent and understand the sport's global diversity. It has been instrumental in expanding the UFC's footprint beyond traditional pay-per-view viewers. UFC fighters are not only athletes but also entertainers. Many cultivate charismatic personas, engage in trash talk, and participate in press tours to build hype for their fights. This blend of sports and entertainment is essential for selling pay-per-view events and creating long-lasting fan bases. The UFC's strict anti-doping policy, enforced in partnership with United States Anti-Doping Agency (USADA), subjects fighters to random drug testing year-round. This system aims to keep the sport fair and safe, though some critics argue that the policy's complexity sometimes leads to inconsistencies in enforcement and public controversy. Fighters often use mental visualization techniques, meditation, and sports psychology to prepare for bouts. This mental training helps them manage the immense pressure of fighting live in front of thousands of fans and millions watching globally, helping improve focus, confidence, and emotional control during fights. Many UFC fighters come from humble beginnings, overcoming poverty, crime, or hardship before reaching the sport's highest levels. These personal stories resonate with fans and add depth to the fighters' public images, making their victories feel like triumphs over adversity. The UFC has steadily increased its global presence by holding events in new countries, adjusting fight cards to feature local fighters and promote regional talent. This strategy helps build local fan bases and expands MMA's cultural relevance worldwide, making it a truly international sport. Some UFC fighters train in remote or unusual locations to focus and avoid distractions. Camps in places like Thailand, Brazil, or small mountain towns provide intense training environments combined with traditional martial arts culture, often improving fighters' skills and mental toughness. The UFC's matchmakers work tirelessly behind the scenes to arrange fights that make sense competitively while maximizing fan interest. Balancing rankings, fighter availability, and stylistic matchups requires skill and negotiation, with some fights delayed or canceled due to injuries or contract issues. Many fighters practice unique warm-up routines or pre-fight rituals that include everything from specific music playlists to yoga or even breathing exercises. These routines help calm nerves and prepare their bodies for the extreme demands of a fight. The UFC's pay structure varies widely, with champions and top stars earning millions, while many entry-level fighters earn modest sums. This disparity has led to ongoing debates about fighter pay, unionization, and revenue sharing within the sport. The UFC occasionally hosts special super fights, which are non-title bouts featuring marquee fighters from different weight classes or eras. These fights generate enormous fan excitement and often headline major events, creating memorable moments in MMA history. Fighters' walkout music and entrances are carefully planned to build atmosphere and fan engagement. These moments are often shared widely on social media, contributing to the fighter's brand and the overall spectacle of the event. The UFC continues to innovate in broadcast technology, incorporating real-time stats, fighter biometrics, and enhanced camera angles to improve viewer experience. These technological advancements help bring fans closer to the action and deepen their understanding of fight dynamics.